I am on the senior member of the education committee here in the House. So I spend a lot of time on behavioral health issues, in particular on cognitive development. And not a surprise, but now we know because of imaging that when you exercise and when you run, do aerobic exercises, you get to be smarter in every way, including this. So I like to tell people when they tease me, I said, I run because I'm stupid and I want to be smarter.
That was Representative Mark DeSaulniers. Today on the Running Effect podcast, it's a privilege to welcome on my first person ever on the podcast from Capitol Hill. And I kind of had this idea a few months ago that I wanted to start to have more people on the podcast who are runners, but that's not what they do professionally. And it's just a hobby, a side passion, something that's a part of their life, but it's not the full part of their life. In this case, Mark is a congressman, and he has been since 2015 out of the state of California, and he is a big runner. He's a massive runner. He's done 23 marathons, including Boston and New York, as he talks about in today's conversation. He's run 3:04 in the marathon, and he's been running for decades. And it was honestly such a fun conversation to have someone of such prestige and such, he's remarkable. It is so impressive, obviously, to become a U.S. congressman, while also having run 23 marathons, and to talk to him, not at all about politics, but literally just about his running and how it has shaped him. As I just said a minute ago, this conversation, we do not discuss politics at all. That's not my show. It'll never be my show, but it's cool to have someone on who is so successful in that area to talk about running and how it has impacted him. I love this conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do. Mark was just a true honor and privilege and joy to talk to. And I know you guys are going to enjoy this one. If you do, share it with a friend, a family member, a teammate, someone who you think would find value and benefit from it. Hit the follow button or subscribe button wherever you're listening so you never miss another episode. And make sure to give us a 5-star review. It takes like 5 seconds. Cherry on top really helps us out with the algorithms. And without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Congressman Representative Mark DeSaulniers. Congressman DeSaulniers, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. And you can call me Mark if you want.
Mark, appreciate you coming on the podcast. We talked about this 1 second ago, but I said I didn't know there was someone in Congress who has run 23 marathons in their life. To your knowledge, how many people on Capitol Hill are runners?
Well, I've been here, I'm in my 11th year, and I've never heard anybody say they've run one. So,
really?
Yeah.
Is that surprising to you?
Not that surprising. I don't know what percentage of, I used to know this, what percentage of the population actually completed the marathon, and it's pretty small.
I think it's like 1%. So
right,
super
that's
small.
what I remember. Yeah. There has to be a fairly high level of masochism to do it. But then I always tell people, I stopped running marathons when I got elected to office, so I think I just substituted my need for masochism. This isn't as healthy as running marathons.
I want to go back in time. What was that first marathon like? What was the impetus to do it? And were you, as you would consider, a runner before you had ran a marathon?
Yeah, so I played high school and college sports, particularly for lacrosse. I went to high school. I grew up outside of Boston. So part of it, I think, just thinking about this conversation was how ubiquitous the Boston Marathon is to everybody. I remember watching the end there at the old Prudential Center when I was a kid. And then particularly for lacrosse, there was a lot of distance running. So it's just the joy of getting out and running. I like to refer to it as the taffeta of looking through leaves when you're out in the woods, running and the sun's coming down on you and you're sweating, and wonderful. So that's what started it. And I think probably when I moved to California, I just continued to run. I had a guy who was sort of my coach. He did ultra marathons. He did ultra marathons. Al Arnold, sort of famous in the ultra marathon world. And he came up to me in the gym one day and he said, "You've got a weird physique. Your upper body looks like you're a football player and your lower body have bird legs. So why don't you run distances?" And he encouraged me to do it. Our goal was to do a sub 3-hour marathon and to be able to bench press twice my body weight. This was when I was in my 20s. And he was like my little marketing person. So he got a local newspaper to do a story. And then I ran in the Napa Marathon, which was sublime.
Sub 3 hour marathon. We talked about the percentage of people who run a marathon. Sub 3, even in 2025, is the holy grail. How close did you get to that mark?
3:04 twice. So it's a
Wow.
heartbreaker. Yeah. I don't think I
Wow.
could make it anymore, but that was in my 20s. So I thought I had it at the Humboldt, beautiful, beautiful rural marathon in Northern California through the Redwoods. And I forget what my pace was at 18, but I was right on it. And then just didn't make it.
Wheels
So,
came off.
yeah, I did 3:04 and 3:06. So pretty damn close.
Yeah, that's remarkable. For you in that pursuit, obviously, I feel like as time has gone on, we have more technology, the shoes are faster, all of that sort of stuff. We have GPS watches. You probably couldn't fathom what that was back in the day. You're probably still driving with maps. Was that, I'm sure 3:04 was way more rare back in the day. Were you pretty far up in the pack of that race? And were you aware of, how prestigious that was?
No, I was just really focused in the joy of the running and trying to meet the goal. Um, Actually, my personal best was probably Big Sur, which I think that's uphill, beautiful,
Mhm.
beautiful marathon. I ran in the first one and the third one. I did it 3 times, and I think I did 3:12 in that. The handicap in those days was about 20 minutes. So ironically, that was my best shape. I'd done the best training, and that was my going to be like 4 months before I did another. I think it was Avenue of the Giants again, because that was more of a flat. Yeah. So it's just, at a certain point, as so many people understand, you set these goals and then it just becomes the joy of the running, but also measuring your running and getting
Totally.
in that zone where your VO2, your motion is just, what do they call it? Contact.
It's like flow state. For
Yep.
you back in the day, what was training like? What was there? Was it Runner's World magazine? Was it track and field news? Did you stay up to date on any of that? How did you know how to train?
I did that, but it was mostly from Al Arnold, my ultra distance marathon guy. He got a lot of notoriety in the runner's world. This is 30, 35 years ago, where he ran across Death Valley
Wow.
in an ultra marathon. So he just was a friend. I owned a restaurant. He used to come to the restaurant, and he worked at the athletic club I belonged to. And he just decided I was a project for him. So he really was my trainer, and he pushed me. So, and then as you and all of your listeners know, you just learn to love the sort of transcendental nature of getting your body to that flow where you're just in the zone, and relatively to wherever you are as an athlete.
Sure, sure. What was the transition like for you from, you mentioned lacrosse player to realizing you were running a lot within lacrosse, and that person made the comment about your body physique getting into it kind of because of that. What was that transition like? I think a lot of people back in the day, when they're really set and intent on one sport, it can take a minute to transition out and think, oh, I'm no longer a lacrosse player. I'm now a runner. What was that transition like for you?
Well, in high school and college, my coaches thought one of my talents was endurance. It might be a little that I was a little stupid, but like in lacrosse, I'd start center midfield, and I'd play man down, man up. So I just was on the field all the time. It was similar in the other sports. Um, so endurance was important. So the transition to running was sort of part of that. That I just liked being on the field, and I built my endurance. Part of it was probably genetic, but I just enjoyed that. And the running, in some ways, the running was more sublime in a way because it's more just simple. You're not chasing a ball. You're not worrying about somebody else. You're just out in the trees and just in a groove.
I think a lot of people who run a marathon have this experience after the first one where they cross the finish line in agonizing pain after willing themselves on for an hour or 2 hours or four, whenever the pain starts to set in, and they think, gosh, I'm never doing this again. And then maybe a week down the road, they start planning for their next one. What was that experience like for you? Did you want to do
Yeah.
another one after you had done one, or did you think, man, I'm never doing this again?
Oh yeah, I wanted to get right out there. I was ready to do another. I would have run back up the Silverado Trail, which is what Napa is. Just a beautiful, the mist. I still remember in the morning. I ran that a couple of times. Yeah, I want to do it again. And I think it was a combination of competitiveness and the realization that although it's an amazing struggle, there is a reward to that struggle.
Hmm. I love that. I love that. For me, I was born in Pennsylvania. I live in Ohio, and I feel like it was only the last 2, 3 years that I started to go out West Coast. And the first time I was in California was San Diego. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is paradise on earth. I didn't know something existed in the US. For you and your running pursuits, how much do you feel like, and obviously now as a congressman representing California, how much do you feel like the nature and the beauty of California fueled some of these runs? Because not to throw shade at other states in the US, but there's California is the cream of the crop in terms of nature and beauty and taking it all in.
Yeah. Well, not to take away from my experience growing up in New England, that was sensational. But, in the winter, it was hard to go out and run for a long distance and get comfortable. And it built character, as my mom used to say. But in Northern California in particular, the weather is so temperate, it makes it easier. And then I agree, the physical beauty. I used to run, when I lived in San Francisco, I'd run along the Embarcadero from the Embarcadero YMCA, which is by the Bay Bridge, out to the Golden Gate Bridge, tap the Golden Gate Bridge and come back round trip. And that was 11 miles. And it was both urban, but when you'd get out to the Presidio, it was just these spectacular views. And I live right next to a very large state park. So it was a great training run because it's 2,800 feet from sea level, which where my house was, and I could run a half mile into the gate, and then I'd go up, and I'd do it for sunrise, which was spectacular. I ran into mountain lions. I had local
Really?
press. I had local press follow me up, meet me on the top one day for sunrise. So actually, in some ways, it got me into politics because, in addition to the restaurant, I became known as this fitness person locally.
Mountain lions. You live to tell the tale. Tell me about it.
Oh man, I was halfway up Juniper Campground on Mount Diablo, and I'd done these switchbacks, probably go up 1,200 feet, really good for training. And there's this little flat period before you start doing more switchbacks, and there's well water up there, so it's spring water, so it's just great for rehydrating. And I came around, and I think I was a little bit in the zone. Dawn had started, and I looked ahead of me, and my trainer had done these, and he said, "You might run into some bobcats. You'll run into deer, and if you're lucky, there are mountain lions up there. So they're tracked." So I came around a corner, and I looked up, and it was sort of roly-poly, and I said, "Oh, there's a bobcat in front of me." I said, "No, dude, that's not moving like a bobcat. That's moving like a lion." So it was very cool. It wasn't probably mid-size because I've run into other ones that were large. And he got off the trail, went in the bushes, and it was so cool. What my trainer told me was, if you run into one, don't panic. They sense that, and don't run away. Show that you're tall, so don't crouch. That was one of the things. So he had said, just keep running, and if he makes a move to you, make yourself as big as possible. So I followed his instructions. The mountain lion, went into the bushes. Just a beautiful, I can see it so clearly. And he just sat there on his hinds. And I think he sort of ran by me and said, "Good morning." And he sort of looked at me like, "Oh, this is such a dumb species. They're not worth eating." And then I went off to the top of the mountain, tapped the summit, and went back down, which is about, in my training, according to my trainer, was about a 30-mile run.
Wow. You were doing 30 miles as a training run?
Yeah, and the elevation.
Crazy.
It
Wild.
was beautiful.
Where did you find the time to do that? I don't know where that sat in terms of either your political pursuits or owning a restaurant, it sounds like, but how did you make the time, to train for these pursuits?
It was pre-politics, and restaurants take a lot of time. But I think, in hindsight, it was so good for me. So I just get up early in the morning and get it done. And it's like any good habit. You just start doing it; it becomes the natural thing you do. Restaurant business is long hours. The restaurant I owned the longest near my house was 30 years, and it stayed open until 2 in the morning, and there was a lot of alcohol involved. So in that regard, it was very healthy for me because in my generation of bar and restaurant owners, people drank way too much. So it
Sure.
really, I think, helped keep me alive and keep me healthy. And I was aware of that when I was doing it because most of my friends thought a lot of them were former Pac-12 athletes at Cal and Stanford. And they were like, dude, why don't you just come out drinking? I'm like, no, I got to get up early in the morning and run.
They thought you were the crazy one. To the point of, playing sports back in the day, high school, college, lacrosse. I don't know how in tune you are with, current high school sports, but obviously the landscape has changed drastically with GPS watches, I said, fancy technology, really across the board, things like NIL. I mean, it's just a different landscape. And I do wish I could, go back to your era. I think it was a more pure view of sports. Do you recall any fond memories going back to those days of practice?
Absolutely. I'm still best friends with people I played football, basketball, and lacrosse in a little boarding school in Western Massachusetts and at Holy Cross Catholic College in Central Massachusetts. It's that human teamwork. I mean, as a species, we've evolved to where we are, for better or mostly for worse, because we learned to work together. It wasn't that we were the biggest or the strongest. And team efforts, and I would say this applies for democracy. When you work well together, the gestalt of that, the sum is greater than the total of the parts. So that teamwork, it's magical. And for me, actually, I haven't really thought about it, but so much about being in the people business, in the restaurant business, and then in politics. Those team sports were a big part of that, and it's just the purity of it.
Off of that point, I think one of the beautiful things that you've kind of mentioned without diving too far into is the aspect that sports, or running in this case, can teach you certain attributes. And I think that's why it's powerful for a younger demographic, whether you're in middle school or high school, to get kids involved in sport. As it really teaches you discipline. It's hard to learn discipline independent of a pursuit. What were some of those things early on, whether it was lacrosse or in this case, running, could be lacrosse though, where you felt like you learned teamwork, you learned how to work with people, discipline, whatever it might be, fill that out, things that you feel like you learned from sports or running?
Well, it's gestalt. It's that you were part of something bigger than yourself. The sum was greater than the total of the parts. My high school roommate just passed away a couple weeks ago. I found out about it in Massachusetts. He was a quarterback of the football team, captain of the basketball team, captain of the baseball team. So I played lacrosse. And it was just those friendships and those bonds. And don't think you can minimize that. And as you know about running, it's great for not just for your heart, your cardio. We know it makes you smarter now. The neuroscience of this. I am on the senior member of the education committee here in the House, so I spend a lot of time on behavioral health issues, in particular on cognitive development. And not a surprise, but now we know because of imaging that when you exercise and when you run, do aerobic exercises, you get to be smarter in every way, including this. So I like to tell people when they tease me, I said, I run because I'm stupid and I want to be smarter.
I love that. You should put that on a t-shirt. It's a good campaign promo.
I'm not sure that's good for campaigning, but
I wouldn't know. I'm not in that business. I'm in the running business. For you, talking about, you mentioned this before we got kicked off, runner's high. So I know you know what it is, kind of off of your comments there. Do you recall that first moment of thinking, oh, this running thing is different? I'm feeling different. I'm feeling, what we would call runner's high now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was, I got to get emotional about it. I don't know how old I was. I think I was in middle school, and I was running through the woods by my house in a rural area outside of Boston. And just that taffeta, I still think of that. The sun coming through the morning and as you're perspiring. And I remember that trail. It's part of me.
I think a lot of people with running, it's some of the only time that you have with yourself. It's, when you're living your life, you're with people, or this is assuming you're going on runs by yourself, but you're with people, or you're doing schoolwork, or you're in a job, or whatever it might be. And I think, at least speaking from personal experience, it's during those runs that you think of dreams, of aspirations, of goals. Going back in time, did you ever think about, owning a restaurant, or being in Congress, or getting married, whatever it might have been? What were some of those thoughts early on?
Yeah, there's research about this, that in running you sorted your problems out because your mind, the chemicals of your mind are both slowed down and more focused. And there are very few circumstances that I'm aware of in human existence where you get both of that. So when I had stress in owning restaurants, sorting out whether it was employee issues or financial issues, and same for politics, I'd go out for a couple hours and I had sort of figured out what I needed to do. It's the meditation part of running. Early on, when I was a bartender in San Francisco, I first got there, I'd run on the Marina Green, which is similar to the run, well, it's part of the run that I mentioned. And you're looking at the Golden Gate Bridge and Alcatraz. And I still get emotional thinking about, as a 21, 22-year-old who had driven across country by myself and thinking, God damn it, how did I get so lucky? And those connections helps you with problem solving, I really think, because it allows you chemically and emotionally to sort of focus on things. My youngest son, I have two sons, they both run, but he's got an 11-mile run. He lives in LA and he goes out and runs along the Pacific Ocean. And whenever he's got something he wants to talk to me about, I said, dude, you need to go for a run. And it's almost always like, I went for a run, I'm fine now. I don't need any fatherly advice, just shut the hell up, and I worked it out.
That's so true. I haven't thought of it that way, but I thinking through my own personal experiences when I've had issues or struggles or things to think through going on a run, you generally work through it. You find pathways. And I think a lot of that specifically more as of late is because we're so caught up in our phones and other people that we don't spend time with ourselves. We don't think through those things, and running allows that outlet, as well as kind of like you explained better than I can here, the scientific process with neurons and all of that, where you think a little clearer, a little more deeper, all of that. So
that makes you smarter.
Yeah,
I would advise it to all my colleagues. The country would be in better shape. But
if we put Congress, everyone train for a marathon, go run a marathon. Speaking of the marathons,
a lot of my colleagues think I'm a crazy Californian. So it's like, God, geez. He admits to going to therapy and running.
Speaking of those marathons, so we've talked about the 23 of them. Which would you say is the most memorable from a positive perspective, and which would you say is the most memorable from a negative perspective, whether it was the race went terribly or the course was terrible, or I don't know, you didn't have a good night of sleep before?
I know they were all great in their own way. I sort of separate them into urban and rural. The ones I mentioned, Napa, Avenue of the Giants, Big Sur, and then I've done New York, Boston, did Paris, which was pretty memorable. In those days, Paris went right along the river, the Seine, and it was on cobblestone. So that I remember that as being, only the French would torture you enough to run a marathon where the pavement is. And I think they've corrected that. My kids used to say, we do these really cool vacations, but they're based on Dad's marathon running. So.
I'm curious, back in the day, I don't know what pair of shoes you own now, but shoes these days have the biggest stack heights. They've got carbon fiber plates, all kind of the whole 9 yards to really make you fast or to protect your body. Looking back, I look at my grandpa's shoes and I'm like, yeah, you had nothing under you. Do you remember what you were wearing back in the day? As well as with marathons, there are these intricate fueling processes. What were you eating or drinking during the marathon?
I just love your expression back in the day. I feel like, we were crossing the prairie on the horses.
I'm a young guy.
I know. My sons give me a bad time all the time. One of the things I'll say funny about sportswear, footwear, is that black cons have become popular again. That's what we wore in high school basketball. So I think, for all this investment in Air Jordans and everything you just mentioned, you see all these young people wearing the same goddamn sneaker that I wear in basketball. Having said that, for a long time I've run on New Balance because my trainer, I was a striker, and because I was heavy for the distance I was doing, and being from Boston where New Balance is, I just have always found out personally, and I wear through them at a slower rate, but just because of how my heel hits.
I think New Balance, I could be so off on this, so someone could fact check me, but I think New Balance is the one. They're from Boston, I think they're from New England. And then 2, I think they're the only shoe manufacturer to make shoes only in America, which is
That's
pretty neat.
what I remember too.
Yeah. So it's cool. I'd love to talk about March 2020, if you might. You were on a run with your son in Washington, D.C. Take people through what happened that day.
Actually, I wasn't on a run with my son. We were both pushing ourselves to run in a marathon. So I wanted to run my first for
Got
like
it.
10, 15 years, and he wanted to run in his first. So when I'm here, my house condominium is on Capitol Hill near the Capitol, and one of the routes is down the mall to Lincoln and back. If you go the right route back, it's about 6 miles round trip. You can go over the river, go down towards Mount Vernon, and you can extend it as long as you want. So it was an absolutely beautiful night. I took pictures because it was just one of those stunning DC nights. And I had been running enough that my pace was up and I was feeling good. And on the way back, right by where I'm sitting now, he's probably just the other end of this building, the Rayburn office building, there's one of these strange intersections, if you know DC, where the streets are diagonal. And so the light was changing and I was accelerating. And I said, I can make this light. And I didn't see a little pothole. And I just lost my balance. And, anybody who's run has fallen. So I was going through the air, and I still remember, and I had my phone in my right hand. I was listening to music, which I never do. I had a strap and it was slipping. So I said, screw it, I'm just going to hold it. And I went out, and because I had the phone in my hand, I leaned away from it, and I'm literally in the air. And I remember thinking to myself, oh man, this is going to hurt. So I tucked myself this way, fell on the ground. It was hard. And there was a Capitol police officer, a couple of them in a security shack right next door. And they saw me fall, and they came out and said, man, what'd you trip on? We looked back. So I was sore. Went home, went to sleep. I got up and I was sore. So I went to see the health unit here on Capitol Hill. Doctor looked at it, took x-rays. You broke 4 ribs. We'll just keep an eye on it. And they missed it. I got pneumonia, which is not unusual for somebody over 50 and when you break your ribs. So I went down 3 times. They just kept telling me, you'll be fine. You just got to be patient. There's nothing we can do to heal them. And then I was about to fly back to San Francisco, but I was really having trouble breathing. But the doctors had kept telling me you were fine. And then my chief of staff said, you're not going back. We're going back into the health unit in the U.S. Capitol. So they took me in a wheelchair, brought me out. And the last I remember was they put me in an ambulance behind the U.S. Capitol. And in the ambulance, the paramedic was over me, and the driver said, should I turn my emergencies on? And he said, oh, yeah. And that's the last I remember for 5 weeks. They took me to George Washington. That's where the ICU is for DC. I was on a ventilator for 4 weeks, and I was in the ICU for 5. And my kids had to fly back, and my kids describe flying back. And this is the context, I was running for a marathon. They fly back. They were told it was an emergency. They go into a windowless office at George Washington, and the doctors tell them that I'm not going to make it, that they should get prepared. And the next day they get a phone call thinking it was the hospital telling me to tell them that I died. And they said, you got a little better last night. And then it was a long road back. And I've been told by my primary care doctor I've known for years, after I got better, he said, Stanford Medical School, wonderful guy, he said, Mark, I've known you for a long time, so I can tell you this now. You're not supposed to be here, man. I've seen cases like this, whatever got you through this. But the doctors told me at the ICU when I got out, they said that probably saved your life. It almost killed you, that freak fall on that run. But if you weren't in the shape you were, you never would have made it. Because all that night, all of my organs were failing, starting with your kidney, which is normal. So it's funny, I just had a very conservative colleague on the floor from North Carolina who's a friend. We disagree on everything, but she walked up and she said, I just saw you speaking down on the floor. And I told my staff, that's DeSaulniers. He's a message to our prayers, because I'm really wonderful. All these people send me these wonderful notes, and people like this colleague who we don't agree on much, but we have affection for one another, just told me, he said, I prayed for you every day. So it's really something.
It's
But don't
amazing.
stop running because of that story. It actually saved my life.
Yeah.
Just watch out. It turns out it was a pothole.
Yeah. Watch out for potholes.
And,
Watch out for potholes.
and if the light's changing, relax. Wait for the light to change.
I think I read somewhere that your chance of survival was slated at 10% at one point. Obviously, I'm sure you can speak to this, as I would love you to. Those are life-changing, life-defining moments. But I think specifically in the context of health or fitness, whether it's something as small as a sore Achilles, which you can't run that day, or something as big as this, where you literally think you might not live to see another day, it reframes your life, your ability to walk, your ability to think clearly. How did that moment and that run affect everything thereafter, after you got out of the hospital, and just your maybe newfound gratitude for movement and health and life?
Well, I have a good deal of survivor's guilt, listening to my staff, my family, people in the community, but particularly my two sons were very close. I got divorced, and the three of us are very close. So what they went through, and they were told that I was going to die by one doctor, and another doctor at George Washington said, well, he's got about a 10% chance. So what I take from that is I was out for most of the experience. When I came to, I was in the rehab unit at George Washington, and all these nurses were coming up to visit me. And I finally asked one of the nurses from the ICU in DC, I said, why do all these people come up? He says, because we rarely get anybody like you. So what I take from it is that life's fragile and every day's a gift. And while I take my job and my life seriously, I also think I have a very clearer view of what my existence is in the context of this amazing, whatever it is we live in, universe existence, and to really enjoy every day because life's so fragile. But you also have to live life to your fullest. So you can't live your life being afraid of things. That paradox of a life well lived, intensely with a sense of curiosity and wonder and joy, but also understanding there's a certain risk to that. In any little thing. It's not like you're going to die because you're curious, but I refer to myself as the Forrest Gump of local politics. I just wandered off and thought things was interesting, including running.
If you could go back and do one more marathon, where would it be?
Oh man, I love Big Sur. It's just such a beautiful. You couldn't do it right now because the Highway 1's out because of the weather, but it's just so spectacular. You know, the very first one I ran in, and you come through these eucalyptus groves along the Pacific Ocean. And so you can hear the ocean, but you can't see it. It's sort of famous. Their logo has this. And you come out of these beautiful redwoods and just in the morning, and then you see the Pacific Ocean in this wide open space on a cliff. And that first one is famous because when we did it, and I was moving, I was psyched up, and I didn't know I should pace myself. So I was in the top 10%. I could see the elite people. You break out, it's like a cathedral. You break out, and there was cows grazing, and one of the mothers was calving. So it became the logo on the Big Sur. So it was this wonderful transcendental moment of just beauty and joy and birth. And so I think I'd probably do that one again, but it's a tough one because it's a net elevation by quite a bit. And then you end up in Carmel, so it's just beautiful. But all of them were wonderful. I mean, crossing the finish line in Boston, of course, for anyone who's been able to qualify and do that, pretty remarkable. That might have been my most frustrating because I really trained hard. I wanted to break 3 hours, even though it's impossible. And in those days, when they started the race in Hopkinton, they handicapped you. So you were actually behind people who were slower. And that road is just a 2-lane country road. So you spend so much energy. They've changed it since then, but you spend a lot of energy just trying to get ahead of people who are slower than you. New York was pretty spectacular, starting on the Verrazano Bridge and the bridge is shaking. And then going through all boroughs was pretty spectacular. And then you end up by the Tavern in the Green. They were all wonderful. It's just a wonderful experience. Every minute of it.
Yeah, as someone, as I said, who hasn't been to California much, what one place or one city should I look to go to one day to run at?
Well, if you're going to do an urban one, San Francisco, I have a prejudice. I mean, it's just beautiful. And if the Presidio is beautiful, you also go across the bridge. My son and I did the sons did the San Francisco half marathon, which is beautiful. And they take you across the Golden Gate Bridge to the other side, and then you come back, which is pretty spectacular. If I was going to do another half marathon, I'd do that one. It's just the route that I took. I've taken one downtown too, and along the one I described along the marina, but the old one started out at Golden Gate Park and then took you across the bridge and back. That's pretty spectacular.
I love running. It's an amazing sport. I want to ask you this question. Actually, real quick before I get to that, San Francisco, I'm sure you're aware, but they've got quite the running scene and quite the run club scene. And I know, again, I haven't been, but I know there's like a public track kind of close to the bridge. And what's your perspective? I mean, I feel like California has always kind of had this allure of people are into health and fitness, but I think specifically San Francisco, people love their running. It's all sorts of, people who are into the sport, who do marathons or just recreationally will join run clubs.
Yeah, it's always been that way. I think that's, when I started running was considered sort of an oddity. So, but in San Francisco, because we're odd people, being odd is sort of normal. So running has been, the Beta Breakers is famous. My older brother, who's long, wonderful relationship, his partner, they've been married for quite a bit of time. He just ran in the Beta Breakers, so he sent a bunch of great pictures and just a bunch of characters.
Final question for you. You've mentioned how much running has had an impact on you and your life. What would you say to someone out there? I'm assuming most people listening to this are runners, as they would be. But let's say someone's listening, they got this far in, and they're curious about running now because of how you've spoken about it. Why should people run, and what's the impact it's had on your life?
It's transformative. It kept me alive. And there is a physical benefit to it, as I've described, but there's also amazing spiritual aspect of it. And we sort of hit on this, the combination of being in nature, of being the solitude, the ability to reflect. There's a lot of spiritual, transcendental moments in running.
Last question for you. Over 10 years into Capitol Hill, did you ever think you would go on a podcast that just asked you about running?
I don't think I ever consciously did, so you're cool, dude. I don't know how you found me, but I'll tell you, this is a rough time back here right now. The things going on in California with a lot of friends in Los Angeles, but it brings you back to a groundedness that separates you from some of the stuff that I deal with in my day-to-day life. And as I said about the near-death experience, it puts things in a perspective I didn't have if that experience hadn't happened. And since that experience is connected to running, I think running makes you more aware of your existence and the best parts of your existence.
Totally agree. It makes you think deeper, makes you think wider, and makes you think about how big the universe is, because you're just a small little peck moving one foot in front of the other wherever you might be. So
and the 1 foot in front of your other is important because you don't have to go fast. Totally. I tell my kids now I don't really run, I trudge. So at first I was like, God damn it, I used to really move, and now I'm just moving along.
I love it. Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. It's truly an honor to hear about some of the experiences and the lessons learned from the 23 events of marathons, as well as just back in the day. I loved, sorry to use that word, back in time, to hear about your history and all the things that have shaped you. And it's awesome to talk with someone who's so accomplished and, so invested in the country that I was born and raised in and now contribute to, and hear about this really unique, cool subset of their life. So keep up the great work. Appreciate you taking the time, and excited to share this one to the masses and see how it impacts people.
Awesome. Let's continue the relationship. Come to DC. We can run the mall, or San Francisco, we can run out to the Golden Gate Bridge.